Yeah, you got it. Okay, we are live. So, James, first, thank you so much for coming on. I've been following a lot of what you've done for the last few years, and I have to be honest, though, I'm getting hold of you today because you're an enigma today, or for me. And so I have a bunch of like personal questions that I may or may not tie into the work or not. But I just wanted to have the opportunity, and I got to meet you at ARC. And
Yeah.
I'm a self-admittedly a no one online. So I want to honestly just thank you for the time to touch base and have a conversation. It's
Yeah,
awesome.
well, it's my pleasure. I'm getting a lot of compliments lately. I do try to, I mean, I'm busy, and as you said before we hit record, you heard on Rogan that I hate video calls and Zoom. But I do try to do these shows, and I try to talk to, I hate to use phrases like this. I'm trying to dance around and not say smaller creators, or something like that.
It is what it is. We're right here.
Because like, but I try to do that because I actually think that you all are closer to the heartbeat of what's going on. The so-called big shows are super produced, they're super fake. The conversations aren't frequently, that real. And I think that the grassroots and the real people has always been where the story is and the real action is. So I'm always happy to do this when I can fit it into my schedule.
I love that you brought that up because so I attended ARC and then I ended up attending one of these events after. It's with the Strouds. And they're it's a little bit more of an exclusive event. You're invited into a room and there's only about 20, 30 people and you get in one-on-one interaction with everyone. But the general feeling I got from it too was that detachment, right? It's the lack of the ground floor. Like we can all have these ideas, we can all stand behind podiums or do these big talks or whatever, but what is the actual marching orders? And I'm going to say
Yeah,
it for men like me. Like
sure.
what do we day to day? How do we change our lives and change our perspectives to enact all of these things? Because I get the general vibe that you and I, although we have very different perspectives on the gem of truth, that we are very much on the same side, looking for the betterment and building of society, right? And so I love
Yeah,
that because
generally.
everything is very removed. And so like one of the things in our conversation is like, yeah, like how do we get this down to the ground level? How do men and women day to day start to live in these values?
Yeah, I found, I mean, what I do is heady, right? I don't mean for it to be elitist. I'm actually, if you even read my work lately, especially, I'm very anti-elitist. I have that wicked anti-elitism that a lot of Americans are characterized by. I found out recently, not to get into it really, but my genealogy, I have I'm apparently, technically, I've never applied, so I'm not formally a son of the American Revolution, first families of Virginia, but also sons of the American Confederacy. As it turns out, that I have a direct line to people who fought in the Revolutionary War, actually with pretty high-ranking Army officials in the Revolutionary War, and that line continues down and through a branch, not my direct line, but a branch off of it contains such that I am cousins to Robert E. Lee, who obviously was a
Oh,
Confederate
that's so
general.
cool.
And so it's kind of cool. So I don't know why in the world I was saying that, but the point that I want to make in general about this, how do we get this information? Oh, I was talking about how I'm heady or whatever.
Yeah.
That was all about, connecting with the people. And what I want to think about is, and what I learned about, or what I've learned is that even though my material's heady, right? Um, I'm not this elitist character. I find that people can absorb my material better when they kind of know me. So I try to get to know people. I do probably 10 to 1 small grassroots events that either cannot pay me or can barely pay me as compared to the big events on the big stages. But I think a bigger point here, and I think it's the most important point with a lot of movement politics, and I see this happening very badly in MAGA, for example, very quickly right now. It definitely happened with the Democrats. And I've seen it at God knows how many conferences. But there's this phenomenon that I call the stage losing the room, right? And so you can imagine whether it's a theatrical performance or dramatic performance, or whether it's, literally like a political conference or a political movement, when the elite tier, the people on the stage, are not actually intermingling with and understanding and getting to know and treating as equals, in other words, abandoning that elitism, the people down on the ground who are actually the movers and shakers, as I phrase it sometimes, the true unsung heroes of the movement. They're what makes the movement a movement, as a matter of fact. It turns out it's not the upper crust, it's not the
It's
thought
not it's
leaders
not
or
the people
anything.
behind the podium, it's the people in the
No.
kitchen.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And the thing is those people have the reason that all this happens, the reason a movement happens in the first place is because those people have real concerns. They have real problems. They want real solutions. They don't want to effing show about it. They want solutions to the problems. They want to be informed about what's going on. They want to understand the problem correctly. They want to know, as you said, what can somebody like me do about it? And that's what they're actually looking for. But if you are behind the podium and don't interact with those people, sure, you might have picked up 2 years ago what the problem was. You might have had your finger right on the pulse. But the problem is things change. Things change all the time. In fact, that's the point, is that you wouldn't have a movement if you weren't trying to make something change. You're not just having a movement, a huge political movement for fun. Nobody does that. The point of the huge political movement is to try to, affect politics and make a difference. And so the conditions change. We've won some battles. Some things have gotten worse. Some things have entrenched. A lot of things have changed with the election of Donald Trump, for example. Things have changed. And it's very easy to stay behind your podium, stop communicating with people who are actually out there on the ground doing things. And suddenly you're talking about something that's not actually relevant to them anymore. And that's even without adding the dirty, cynical element, which is that some people, as we all know, whether they're foreign or domestic, as the saying goes, are bad actors. They are plants or assets, whether it's intelligence assets, foreign assets. There's all kinds of people out there. And I say that, I'm not accusing people in the so-called MAGA movement of being, bought and paid for, but we know that that's happening. And
Mhm.
we also know that the people on the internet are not always who they appear to be. We know there are Chinese bots. We know there are Chinese intelligence operatives operating as Americans
I
on
gotta, I
social
see a
media.
theme with you across. I see a theme of like on both sides. You are like a disruption detector and a disruptor, which makes
Hmm.
sense. And I like this too. I wanted to talk to you about this because I love Freudian psychology. I love getting to know people. I love authentic relationship, right? Like
Hmm.
nothing more than this. I'd love for us to remember each other's names and have some form of relationship with every human I meet past this point. So I got familiar with you through your grievance papers, grievance studies, which I thought were absolutely phenomenal. The ultimate shit posting judo flip of my 30s. So thank you. I salute you there. And so I noticed though, but at the time, correct me if you're wrong here, you were associated with the left side of the aisle while you were doing the grievance studies. And
Hmm.
so there you are, like picking apart your own side per se, but articulately and in ways that was appreciated by everybody, and my not everyone, appreciated
Yeah.
by the people that who enjoyed the information you brought to light. And now I see you've shifted like to right of center, right? And
Hmm.
I see you orbiting the center, which is usually where I usually stay too. And it's a very similar. You're excellent at picking out the disrupting elements in what's going on in the party. And so you're so good at doing this. Do you see yourself also as ever bringing it back together, or is it the act of separation? Like, where's your spirit go with all this?
I mean, so we're talking kind of about two different things. There's my talent and my spirit, right? So my PhD is in a very specific form of mathematics. It's not very employable, called
What type of
enumerative
math is it
combinat.
in?
It's called enumerative combinatorics.
Cool. No clue what that is.
There's no need to explain it,
Very good.
but a kind of explanation that will cause people to go bananas on the internet because it's a little bit too low resolution is that it works with detecting certain kinds of numerical patterns.
Cool.
Okay, so I sometimes joke, and I've been yelled at for it, but I don't care, that I have a PhD in pattern recognition, right? Well, the thing is when you're looking at numerical patterns, sometimes they're really obvious, right? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. You can guess the next number really easily, right? The numerical pattern's obvious. Add 2 every time. But sometimes they're not very obvious. And sometimes in pure math, there's no such thing. It's not engineering. There's no such thing as noise. So if you have a pattern and then all of a sudden one of the numbers doesn't make any sense, you've got something else going on. So it was like 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11. All of a
Okay.
sudden the pattern doesn't work, right? And so
I see the direct
you
analog
become,
here.
so my job, my training, my academic training, my actual for a decade roughly passion was to study at literally the highest levels you can get like certified at. You can, go deeper. You can be a professional mathematician for 30 or 40 years and go deeper. But the highest level you can get certified at is a PhD, really. I guess you could get like a, you know, tenured chair professorship or something or whatever,
Sure.
endowed chair. But I guess, you know what I mean. And I spent all this time learning how to do that. And the thing is when you have what it looks like a pattern, and then there's an anomaly, but you know that my job was to figure out what pattern I was dealing with. That the underlying assumption is there may always be some pattern that can be described. And when you hit an anomaly in pure math, there's in engineering, it's easy. Oh, it's a bad measurement. And you just keep going with your pattern like that 11 wasn't there. There's an old joke about that, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13. Okay, all the odd numbers are prime. Nine is experimental error, right? And that's an old engineering joke, right? Because nine's obviously 3 times 3, it's not prime. And engineers and scientists kind of can fudge that because they have limitations on their data collection process. In pure math, there is no that. If you have an anomaly and there's a pattern, it is a different pattern. It is possibly a pattern that's never been described, which is very
We're
frequently
into like
what I was trying to
Godel
work with.
realm. Yeah.
Yeah, so now you have to like describe something completely new and you have to figure out what it is. So I had trained for years, in other words, to notice what seems to be a pattern, maybe like the triangular numbers or something like that, except that they diverge at some point from the triangular numbers and start doing something different. So maybe the first six are the same as the triangular numbers, then they go off in a different direction that grows maybe a lot faster than the triangular numbers. Okay, so what am I dealing with here? What is it? Why does it do that? How is it fundamentally different? And there may be pure coincidence that it matches those other numbers, or there might even be a reason it matches those other numbers, like that in the small situation it collapses to the same structures that you get for
So
the
you're
triangle
you're
numbers.
you're personally super tuned in to finding patterns in data sets. Like you
You can
naturally
see,
gravitates.
well, beyond data sets, it's like a movement has a current, it has an attitude, it has a spirit,
Yeah.
right? And so it's not that hard to take that, like these numbers don't fit. So what's going on here and how can I describe it? um, Skill and talent and energy and transfer it over to, okay, I thought we were all doing this and now these guys are doing that and it's not the same thing. Right. And so what are they doing? Well, let's figure out the name of their pattern. Oh, it's woke. And so I
Hmm.
did that with the left very clearly. It looked like liberalism for a lot of things. It was, a little progressive. It was way too demanding in its range of tolerance, but generally it fit within what people called the socially liberal sphere. It wanted really aggressive progressive taxing that fits within the economic liberal tier.
Hmm.
But maybe they still believe in America till you start realizing, oh no, they don't, right? So I read Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States, and I'm like, what in the hell is this? This is different. This is not what I thought we're dealing with. And that's tame by comparison. I started reading feminist papers and gender studies papers. That's what led to the grievance studies.
Yeah.
I started reading critical race theory, and I'm like, holy smokes, it starts out like on the first page that it is a critique of classical liberalism that rejects Enlightenment rationalism. I'm like, this is not the same animal. What
Your
is
your
this?
work was my window into that insanity, eh? Thank you.
So, right. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So, I happen to notice a similar, the name for it in politics is a splinter, or in religion even. I notice a similar splinter growing in the right. I mean, it's been there, right? There's always been this current of like, radical right-wing identity politics. It's one of the reasons that the right was so disempowered And conservatives even had to be somewhat disempowered. And ever since William F. Buckley Jr., that the conservatives have had to kind of have this constant fight, not just against their political enemies to their left that they wanted to compete with for power within the mainstream, but also this radical flank. They had to keep them out because even a little bit of actual white supremacy getting into the story would tank their electoral chances completely,
Hmm.
because the people rejected it. And so something different has been there. It got very virulent before Trump's first election. It went by the
Hmm.
brand name alt-right, which, if
Hmm.
I'm not mistaken, they gave themselves, which stood for alternative right. So we're not going to be the same mainstream right. We're going to be an alternative right. But what it was a new version infused with some postmodern silliness and internet stuff of these same old currents that had been paleoconservatism and other things back in the 1960s split
Hmm.
and before that. And it kind of got reinvigorated. But the problem was for them, Donald Trump got elected, which is what they wanted, which they pushed for. They were the first early adopters of the Trump presidency idea in 2016, to their credit, which they try to, ride off into the sunset with right now. But they were the first early adopters of Trump, and then Trump got elected, and that's a big problem for them. In fact, Trump's entire movement leading up to his election became a big problem for them because you cannot get elected in the United States of America, or really almost any country with a functioning system, on a fringe position. You cannot be the radical fringe and get elected without some kind of sophisticated power politics that they simply weren't able to play. Donald Trump had to appeal to the large masses, and he moved, what was the number? Something very high, 70 something million Americans to show up to vote for him. Well, there are not 70 million of these lunatics. There 70 million Americans turned out to vote for Trump, and now he's the president. And the entire conservative side of politics has to realign around the fact that he's president. So the mainstream of conservatism has to at least semi-absorb him, and so now you have something completely different. And these people put their masks on after Charlottesville. It went right up until Charlottesville. They stayed radical. It was all wild. They marched with their tiki torches, which was probably, frankly, an intelligence operation fueling both sides to create a false conflict to put Donald Trump in a bad position. Donald Trump comes out and says, very fine people on both sides. The world explodes. Somebody died in the Charlottesville parade, don't forget. And all of a sudden, they put their masks on. They're just MAGA people helping us fight the left up until right before the election in 2024. But because I swim in not the shady waters, but I've swum in, significant MAGA waters, and I'm this weird character that came in from outside of MAGA, and that I was, in fact, until 2020, I was still saying that I was on the left.
Wait, James,
When
which is
we,
why I'm here with you today. I'm trying to figure you out. Like you're floating around these
um,
things, concepts, like
there's this neat thing out there called the truth, which I
yeah.
can't perceive perfectly, but I perceive as well as I can, which is, I'm going to just be blunt, above average.
Yep.
And it's not perfect, but it's above average. And I'm absolutely committed to it. So when the truth goes with the left, I say the truth and it sounds like I'm going with the left. And
James,
when the
I'm
truth goes
I'm
with the right,
I'm part of a group of Bible studies that's growing in Southern Ontario, which is pretty exciting. Oh, excuse the noise there. Give me one
I
quick
can't even hear
second.
it.
Oh, okay, great. I can right upstairs. Anyways, we describe the truth as a cut diamond with
Hmm.
many faucets, and each of
Hmm.
us are only able to look at one faucet at a time. And so I appreciate your perspective on it, but with
Hmm.
you, very uniquely, I've noticed that you seem to be able to spin the gem.
Sometimes
Yeah, and you seem to be pretty open-handed with a lot of your ideas, which I really appreciated. And it's
it's just
also
ideas. Put them out there.
absolutely, but that's so hard to get across. I'm so impressed that you've jumped from, I don't even like the whole political spectrum having to find a position on it, because really we're observing it.
Yeah.
But I wanted to just hit you with a broad stroke here, and it's only for my own personal identification. I thought about like, oh, gotcha questions and like that. And I want to tell you like specifically, I never want any of those. So please never think I'm trying to nail anything down. Um, Also, I think it'd be a losing battle for me.
Yeah,
But
I'll toast you, buddy.
oh, brother, you got ink by the barrel. I'm going to be cautious. But I feel like that in general, the woke concept I can directly tie to identity politics, and I'm just doing this
Hmm.
to try and simplify it with myself. Would you feel that that is simplest in a simplest terms a good way to boil it down?
I would tell you that it's the most significant symptom of woke. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So again, there's the underlying um, let's go with, I don't know if I want to go as deep, but yeah, metaphysical and philosophical architecture. And one
Brother,
of
I
the,
want to go deep. So you go wherever
okay,
you
so
want.
there's this underlying metaphysical and philosophical architecture to what woke means. It's a type of knowledge, it's an orientation toward knowledge. So it's an epistemology, for example. It actually has an ontological position. A lot of people don't realize that. That ontological position is constructivist. It believes that perception precedes reality, that there is no access to reality. Reality may or may not exist external to us. So, but our perception determines what we see and believe is reality,
So
but
when you
power
said deep, you meant the bottom of the bucket.
all the way to the
Okay,
bottom.
very good.
And so the our power constrains and contours like lenses. Like imagine that we're able to see the world in a certain way, and our perception is indicative of reality as the fundamental belief. That's their ontological position. And then it's like you have glasses on, and those glasses are layers of power that distort the view, usually in the favor of power. But the thing is what it creates is it has an axiology. That axiology was named, for example, by both Hegel and Nietzsche. It's called slave morality,
Hmm.
that there is a split, as Marx described, between oppressor and oppressed. And the oppressor creates a system that the oppressed have to live not just within, but under, but the oppressors only live within it. So they don't live within it and under it, they only live within it. That means that the oppressed have two aspects of view of what's going on. They know what the system is, but they also know why it's rotten, which gives them access to the critical theory. They don't have the power to change the system, so all they can do is criticize it. That gives them the access to the critical theory. Now, I promise you, I'm going to get to where this comes to identity
No, it's good.
politics.
I like the weave.
Okay. And so this slave morality is their theory and system of values. It justifies why they have ends justifying the means. It explains why they think, well, the other side is doing it, so we can do it. We can throw out principle in order to win, because they've adopted what's called slave morality. And like I said, you can read about that in Nietzsche, you can read about that in Hegel. But the epistemological consequence of having adopted that is that the knowledge consequence is that they believe they have dual sight. W.B. Du Bois called it dual consciousness, literally. The feminists, radical feminists, called it standpoint epistemology. Harding said it confers something called strong objectivity, which is a stronger version of knowing what's really going on in the world. Herbert Marcuse referenced it when he wrote One Dimensional Man, saying that capitalism and its culture flattens the world out into one dimension, but the critical theory gives a second dimension of analysis. But the fact is that this entire analysis, and this is what makes it woke, and this is why identity politics is the primary symptom, this entire analysis believes that the oppressor and the oppressed are intrinsically two separated classes that are separated around that dynamic of oppression. They cannot be brought together. There is a dynamic of oppression that is systemic to the society. That's the belief. That's what they wake up to being able to see. And that dynamic is mediated through a class conflict, which comes from oppressor versus oppressed. Karl Marx says this in the first paragraph of the Communist Manifesto. He just doesn't lay it out the way that I've said it. He says it's in a word, oppressor versus oppressed. That means you're intrinsically thinking in terms of class. So there's a bad guy class, which must have some characteristics. They're oppressors, and there's a good guy class who must have some characteristic. They're called oppressed, and they are both intrinsic pieces of a single dynamic whole, which is a whole of conflict between those two classes. And guess what? When you start thinking of yourself as a class intrinsically against another class, you get up identity politics. That's
Huh.
what it is. So if you think that the problem is economic stratification in society and oppression across economic stratification, you get the class warfare of Marxism, and it's proletariat versus bourgeoisie. If you think that the class stratification actually occurs and the conflict occurs around the division of race, you get racial identity politics, which is going to be white versus black, or it's reverse. If you do it, we can do it with sex and men and women, sexuality, normal versus queer, and you can just go down the list. The right doesn't quite play in the same sandbox as the left because the left sees these things in this kind of grand universal scheme that define the parameters of all of humanity. And the right isn't interested in all of humanity, kind of by definition. It's interested, in fact, in some more local definition of identity, usually extending upward to and stopping at the nation, but it can be clan, it can be faith, it can be family, it can be literally communities, like gangland kind of stuff. But usually it stops up at the identity of the nation. So, what the right believes is that its identity as a national unit, which can be defined in three different ways, can be defined politically, politically, culturally, and ethnically, which is difficult. But its identity as a nation has been alienated from participation in its own political process or its own national process. And therefore, they have the same oppressor versus oppressed dynamic, but it's not as cut and dry as white versus black
No, I hear
or
that.
rich versus poor.
My goodness. So we're
It's
talking about
legitimate members
core.
of the nation versus illegitimate members of the nation. I guess they're the oppressors. The interlopers became the oppressors, and the rightful inheritors of the nation are the oppressed. So the identity class becomes the nation. That's the oppressed one. They got double sight because it's oppressed with its slave morality that's now fighting against the oppressors who don't recognize the true character of the nature or its ancestry, which confers through tradition and inheritance something that's being withheld from the rightful inheritors. So that's their model. And like I said, the Italian fascist program was this, just on the brand of political nationalism, identity as an Italian, which was a brand new identity to the world at the time. Italy didn't unify until a few decades earlier. The National Socialists famously used ethno-nationalism. It meant something to be a German ethnically, as opposed to the ethnic minorities that they said that they would subjugate and enslave. I'm not joking. Hitler says that in chapter 11 of Mein Kampf explicitly. But also, of course, the Jew as the parasitic race that had to be exterminated and expelled from Germany because of its threat to the ethno state of Germany. And then Franco did not use an ethnic national identity or even just a political ethnic identity. His is different, and he's a little bit of fascist light as a result. But Franco's was cultural identity, in particular Catholic Spanish cultural identity, which he tried to unify Spain under a Catholic Spanish national identity, of which, of course, he was the head. And this worked in some ways and failed in a lot of others. The Basques and the Catalans, for example, did not particularly enjoy being lumped in with the Spanish, just as kind of some examples, to the point where the Basque separatists are like still bombing parts of Spain just to completely break free of that, even though Franco died in the 70s. So anyway, you get the oppressed identity politics around some definition of the authentic inheritors of the nation or the authentic representatives of the faith, instead of seeing it in terms of something more universal like skin color or
So
economic
brother,
status.
how how do we what does a conclusion, we're talking about the human condition now, perspective
Uh-huh.
and core psychology that instills itself at like base child like very early childhood.
Hmm.
How do we start our conversation today is awesome because this is how you proceed, spreading ideas and discussing ideas and sharing ideas.
Hmm.
But like you see all these issues. Do you see any solutions? Do you have
Yeah.
yourself like a okay, cool. I'd love to hear where you like because you have this crazy perspective. I think that you have maybe one of the most flexible and fluid political perspectives of anyone I know who's spouting their message on mainstream right now. And so you have a really unique perspective, in my opinion. And I would love to know, like, what is the solution? Like, how do we tie this together? How do we educate people? Where do we move forward?
Yeah. So here's the thing. There's not a short-term solution if we want a real solution, right? Um,
Well, I've got about
let's
40 years left on the planet. I've been
Yeah,
alive
well,
for
like let's say you have a disease,
yeah,
right? Let's say like it's a really bad disease. It's very unpleasant. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's super COVID or something, disease X, whatever they're calling it. And
yep.
it's really bad, right? It's miserable. Well, let's pretend for whatever hypothetical reasons that the typical, maybe it's tuberculosis. The treatment course for this disease is months long. It's pretty miserable. It takes a lot of work. You've got to stick with it. You have to see it through or it's really bad. or you could just, shoot yourself. And in Canada, that's like kind of poignant, right? The government will do it for you very kindly if you want to sign up for the MAID program, right? And you're not supposed to talk about that in Canada. But
Can I, while I have this, I'll let you know that 1 in 5, or it's 1 in 20 Canadians right now are being treated via the MAID program.
that's what I've heard.
It's insane.
Actually, the most recent number I heard, but I didn't verify it, is 1 in 16. So check the numbers. I
It's,
don't know
you know
what the
what,
real.
the
It's a
thing
lot.
is, and you and I both probably knew this, as soon as they open the door to it, we're going to do what humans always do. We
Yeah,
pry open and we spread everything out.
that's right.
MAID
Why
has
not
should
this?
have
Well, why not
never been,
that?
yeah.
Slippery slope is not always a fallacy, and government death panels actually can exist. So anyway, not to diverge, but the
Please.
point is, you can get rid of the disease by shooting yourself, or you can get rid of the disease, or you could get rid of the maybe get rid of the disease by some extraordinarily radical treatment of very high risk. Let's put it that way. That might or might not work, or and it might kill you. Let's say there's like some again, this is a hypothetical disease, but let's say that they could like bombard you with some kind of radiation that might have major side effects and it might work and it just can get rid of the disease in some chance. Or you can go through the standard course of treatment that's going to work. So, okay, so what I'm saying is the long, aka narrow way might be a prudent path, but there are not going to be any solutions that work, say, next year, which is dire because people are desperate, things are dangerous. It's hard to keep to use the word very intentionally and correctly. It's hard to keep faith. Remember that the Israelites wandered in the desert for 40 years before they were finally brought to the promised land, and then only 2 out of 12 of them got to go in because their faith had wavered so far, right? So that's your Exodus through Numbers story, if you're wondering where that appears in the Torah. The Christian nationalists get mad when I call it the Torah, even though it's
Why?
obviously the Torah.
It is Torah.
You're supposed to say Old Testament or even Pentateuch, depending on if they're Catholic or not, I guess. It's butthurt is what it is. You're not honoring my identity politics. I'm butthurt. And so, anyways, the point is, what are the solutions? What do they look like? Well, there are two things that have to, or three, I guess, is a better way to put it. The While I don't know that the gatekeeping on the right has been done correctly, and I'm starting with the one that I think is least important. It's the third one I thought of. The gatekeeping on the right that had been enacted from Buckley going forward was not perfect in terms of who it admitted and who it dismissed, but it had the right idea, as the woke right actually would say. It's directionally correct. We have to gatekeep the radicals out of the right to have a viable right wing politics. I don't know all of the reasons why. I have some guesses. We don't have to get into them, but I don't know all the reasons why the population is far more terrified of right wing radicalism than it is of left wing radicalism. I think it's because the sales pitch of left wing is
I think
soft, its method is subversive. They're smarter, frankly, they're less violent. But right wing radicalism scares the shit out of people. And
I
once
think it
you
has
have
a
a
lot
little
to
bit of
do
it, you lose.
with media and the propagation of
That's some of it. I think there's a deeper recoil. I bet we could, I don't have data. I bet we could get data that there is a deeper recoil to the just flat. And I think the main reason, I think there's a reason, which is that the left is very subversive and its sales pitches were trying to get rid of oppression. This is about caring about people and expanding the umbrella of caring. And the right is like, no, tolerance ruined our lives. So we're going to openly and intentionally be intolerant. So everybody goes into a psychological state called reactance, thinking that the right is going to steal their capacities, while the left doesn't cause that reflex. And so I think that that's actually the reason. But if you get too much right wing politics, you're in trouble. But the big answer, really, there are two things that have to be done. One is that radicals, period. I'm not specifying left or right, but the left occupy most of these positions. Canada, of course, is completely in danger here. I'm very aware, or for an American, I'm very aware of the Canadian circumstance. I've done a lot of work with and in Canada. So we have to get the radicals out of power. This is a long-term endeavor. They have to be identified. The only thing they respond to is being caught doing something incorrect or wrong and being removed from power and or held liable legally or criminally. This absolutely, so you
so
have
we went to the
lawsuits, you
bottom
have
of the
to,
bucket. Let's go to the top. We're talking about the WEF then.
well, yeah, we've also, I mean, let's add that dimension. There is a I described this at one point as though like you have this wild overgrowth of poison ivy. That's the woke. taking over our garden, right?
Yeah.
Well, the WEF, United Nations, and in fact, a lot of foreign entities that have huge interests in messing up our Western countries are don't. What do you need to make plants grow? Well, if you're a gardener, you could say all different things, fertilizers, blah blah blah. No, what you mostly need is water. Water is life is kind of a gardening standard, right? If you see any gardener, what do they spend almost any time doing if it's not literally raining right now? Watering. So these entities are watering the poison ivy specifically so that it'll take over a garden. So we've got to cut that off. We've got to be able to identify that there are billions of dollars and massive political and corporate infrastructure built out to push all this crap inorganically on us and figure out how to cut that off.
The problem
That's
is too is
huge.
we're talking like you and I are dealing. We're in our middle age for our first time on this planet, as far as we know, and
Yeah.
and we're dealing with like Bond villain level intentionality.
Yep.
Like, do you think
Welcome
like
to the 21st century.
yeah, hi. Do you think like these organizations like ARC, like I don't know, do you see possibility of ARC itself becoming a political movement like WEF, having the
Um,
political sway or balls or
I
momentum?
don't have that vision yet.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see where it develops and how it goes. I don't
Yeah.
have that vision yet. Okay, but this third solution is the cultural one. Everybody at our level wants to deal with cultural solutions
Hmm.
because we don't have, like, you can't go stop the U. I can't go stop the CCP. I would love
Hmm.
to. I'd love to just push a button here in my office and the CCP's turned off, right? And the Chinese people are free of the CCP, and we can get back to you know great world as usual or whatever. But it's not that simple. These are hard things and they're beyond the reach of normal people. The real thing, this is number one, right? So I just did number three, then number two. The real thing that what do solutions look like? The real thing is that we have to look at the dividing line between taking responsibility and falling into resentment. And we have to stack the deck toward responsibility being the way to deal with things. This is articulable that way and people resonate, but it's more accurate to talk about it in terms of psychology because that's more practicable. And this is something anybody can go do. This is obviously something that Christianity teaches very strongly as well, and Judaism. So this is a major reason. I've been reading Hitler, I've been reading Marx on the Jews specifically. What do they think about the Jews? And there's this recurrent theme in both of these two tyrants, Hitler and Marx, about their views on the Jews that is boils down to internal locus of control versus external locus of control. And that's your responsibility as internal locus of control. I can do something about this and will do as much as I can and will live within what I'm able to create or build. And then the external locus of control is I can't do anything about this. Maybe dot dot dot. So I'm going to adopt a woke slave morality about it and act out as a radical. And that is poison, right? So responsible and it's rooted in resentment, right? I can't do anything. I resent the people who are oppressing me. The mentality of oppression, in fact, not not the realities of actual oppression like we see happening in South Africa, but the mentality of oppression is adopting an external locus of control. And so the goal for us to be talking about by whichever means, whether it's, talking about the fruits of liberty, whether it's just inspiring people, whether it's talking about it through Christian faith or Jewish faith, or whatever it happens to be, is to take as many people who are black pilled and lost in resentment and external locus of control. There's a system of power that's stopping me from succeeding, and to lift them into responsibility or lift them into an internal locus of control. I can't control everything, but I can control a lot of the things in my direct environment. I can take action. Okay, that door is closed to me, so I'm going to go around the building and look for another door. I can keep going. Oh, all the doors are locked. Fine, I'll go build my own building somewhere.
So our
That
so
kind of
our answer
mentality.
is to encourage and inspire our communities until we have more locus of control.
We need to feel like we have agency in the world rather
Mhm.
than feeling disempowered and thus desperate, which is what inspires the slave morality, which inspires the woke, which inspires the critical consciousness, which inspires the identity politics. Yeah, because the answer with identity politics is poor me, I can't do anything as myself. But if I had a whole army of people who all identify, not an army that is, say, voluntary, that people join to go fight for a cause, but a whole army of people who are, you know, to use the QAnon phrase, where we go one, we go all. People that are in that mentality, now you can do something because you're many small reeds bound together, which is, by the way, literally the Latin definition of fascism. That is the emblem of fascism,
Oh,
is
is that
many
Latin?
small.
Fascism is many small reeds bound?
Yeah, fascists, Fesces,
Oh,
fascists.
very interesting.
And so that's where the root comes from. Obviously, Mussolini was looking at the binding of the Roman Empire as his model when he was building out, and that's why he thought it was intrinsic to the Italians. But the fascis is an axe built out of many small, like you imagine an axe handle, but the stick is too skinny. So you put a whole bunch of sticks around it and tie it up with tight cords. That's the idea of fascism. And so that's slave morality and group solidarity, aka identity politics, symbolized and turned into a weapon. And that's the idea of fascism: is that it's identity politics turned into a weapon. It's literally its symbol. And so that mentality takes us away from the individual responsibility, which is this idea that if I take responsibility for my stuff and you take responsibility for your stuff, rather than trying to outsource that to a corporate group entity that has strict, because it's providing protection, it has strict membership requirements. You're not allowed in the group if you're going to defect from it. So you have the cancel culture that follows from the solidarity, which follows from the identity politics, which follows from everything else. But instead, what we want is, hey, look, if you take care of your stuff and I take care of my stuff, and you take care of your stuff so well that you produce a surplus of X and I produce a surplus of Y because that's what we're both good at, and we engage in free trade, free enterprise, then we can actually generate wealth. You can see the polar difference. One is a scrabble for existing power and resources, and the other is literally a mechanism for generating wealth out of mutual individual responsibility being taken, and then trading in the surpluses, the individual responsibility for your small domain of life, um, like whatever it has, whatever your reach is, your 3 feet of influence, so to speak.
Hmm.
Granted, if you're Elon Musk, your 3 feet of influence reaches almost to Mars now, but he's done that not necessarily always on the up and up, but by building piece by piece by piece by piece. It was a huge risk
He's
to take on
another
Tesla.
enigma, man. I hope to
He's
interview him
truly an
one day.
enigma. If you
Have
interview
you
him, good luck.
have you ever had the chance to speak to him?
No,
No,
no, he's
I
above my
don't
pay grade.
I absolutely he's above everyone's pay grade. I
Well, literally.
Yeah, literally. I don't understand him. He's an alien of a man, which he's claimed.
That's right.
Hey, I want to shift gears just quick for I quench my personal curiosity. Would you be comfortable sharing a bit about your childhood and how you grew up? And if
Yeah, I don't
not,
care.
okay,
I had a
cool,
great
man.
childhood.
Tell me about growing up American. What happened to James Lindsay?
I grew up in East Tennessee, man. It was like the 80s. I don't know any better way to
Wait,
put
how
this.
old are you?
I am 46 very soon, so about to turn 46.
Oh, almost happy
Uh,
birthday.
s- so I was born in 1979. My childhood was through the 80s. My teenage years were through the 90s. I went to college from 1997. My bachelor's degree ended in 2001. Those doing the
Both
math,
parents in the house?
yeah, until I went to college. They divorced after I left. Um,
It's incredible the impact you see. It doesn't matter when the parents split. The impact's the same on the family.
yeah, I mean, it can be rough. I was living somewhere else, and my brother dealt with it more than I did. But
Yeah.
at any rate, I grew up in the 80s, which basically, you ever see the opening scene of Indiana, speaking of the 80s, of Indiana Jones and God, which one is it? Is it Temple of Doom, where they're in the Chinese bar in Shanghai, and he's trying to trade for that very obviously fake diamond, and then the tricky Chinese guy poisons him or whatever, and then they fly off in the plane with a little Chinese kid. Daka Jones, right? And so a lot of people forget that scene in Indiana Jones. I think that's the opening scene of Temple of Doom.
Okay.
But I would have to review that. It's possible it's Raiders of the Lost Ark, but I'm almost positive
It's
it's
not, I don't think it's
Temple of Doom.
Raiders. I've seen Raiders about
Yeah,
a
I think it's
thousand
Temple of
times.
Doom. So,
Yeah.
anyways, nobody remembers that. I mean, people do remember that scene, but they kind of forget about it because they all think of the big rock chasing him, right? Down out of the cave where he switched the statue for a bag of sand that didn't work. And the thing is that there's a show tune being played in that fancy Shanghai bar, in that scene in the show tune is anything goes. And so the 80s as a child, you had the dominion of your parents, which was more or less absolute. There was no real like technology. We kind of had video games, but my dad was sort of into the idea of them as cool computer nerdy stuff.
Yeah,
So
cool.
we had like an Atari and then a Nintendo, but it was kind of like, don't rot your life on this. If it's
Hmm.
raining, you can play, you know? Yeah, otherwise, it was like, go outside. And so, from whatever time we got home from school or whatever time we basically got breakfast or lunch into us or whatever in the morning, it was like, I don't want to see you till dinner. Dinner's at
Hey,
6. And if
right
you're
here,
5 minutes
brother.
late, you're going to
We got
die.
like a bag of apples and a kick out the door.
That's right. And if you are late for dinner, it's going to be the end of the world, right? And so
Were your parents
we lived in
strict?
this on this big hill in this very wooded neighborhood. So we
Yeah,
ran around in the forest and climbed trees and like explored the water tower at the top of the hill and like
cool.
did all kinds of stupid boy stuff, figured out with like found rattlesnakes and stuff and like don't get bit. Rode our bikes like demons up and down these hills. It turns out up is hard, down is easy. Um, so it was pretty free range. My parents were pretty engaged. They got us doing Boy Scouts and stuff. And so, learned to water ski, learned all the camping and the fishing and all of that. Did a lot of fishing through my late childhood and early teen years. Very into the outdoor stuff.
Very
Wasn't so
cool.
much of a hunter. It was
Me
okay. I
neither.
never really got into it.
I'm a camping
But
guy, but I don't like killing things.
yeah, I didn't like killing things. I think I'm more okay with killing things now, but when I was like 12, I wasn't ready for that. And so, at any rate, it was a pretty cool childhood. Parents were great. They were engaged. Usually come in, maybe we'd play our video games. We'd have dinner, obviously. Dinner had very strict rules. You're going to eat what was made. You're going to have a little bit of
Yeah, same.
everything. It's
Beautiful.
going to sit on the plate until it's gone and you don't get anything else to eat until you finish whatever. My brother tested that and there were times where he left a meal sitting there on the plate for like 2 days and still had to eat it. My parents gave him no, he tried all kinds of things to get out of having to eat all of his dinner, like
So I will
making it really
conclude that
gross.
your parents were strict in their own
I
way.
mean,
Yeah.
yeah, except that it was literally like go outside and don't bother us until dinner time. And
Yeah.
then we'd watch TV together or play like family board games or card games. There's a lot of card games when we were kids. And then we'd play a little bit with our parents, but they had stuff to do. So then we'd go upstairs and my parents eventually got us our own little card table, kid size. And we literally would go upstairs and play cards like the adults, but just amongst the kids. I don't know, pretty normal. We learned
It
archery,
sounds
ping
like
pong,
an
billiards,
awesome, it sounds like a
swimming.
good childhood in
It was
general.
pretty awesome, yeah.
Yeah, it sounds
Pretty
great.
normal, I think. And like we didn't have any like serious deviations
Yeah.
from, childhood. There was no abuse or trauma, any of that kind of stuff. Very fortunate.
Yeah.
Uh, Great parents.
And so now are you married, kids? What's
Yeah,
your deal?
I've been married since 2007. We met in 2004, so for a long time. She has a couple kids. That's kind of
Yeah.
well known. I don't talk too much about that
No,
because
that's
I try
fine.
to keep
Absolutely.
keep them,
Please.
protected as a controversial
Yeah,
character.
absolutely.
But I raised them from childhood. Uh, I didn't give birth to them. I wasn't there when that happened. And I'm not making a trans man joke here or something.
Ah,
I wasn't involved in their production. We'll
yeah, I
phrase it
got the
that way.
drift.
Yeah. So, but I was there from, their mid childhood all the way through uh, to today. So, you do the math. It's been 21 years.
Yeah, you got it, brother.
So,
I've been married this year for 20 years, believe it or not.
well, very good. There
We're
we
getting
are.
old. Thank you.
It gets better, man. It
Yeah,
gets
it does.
better.
Yeah, if
Even
every
all the
marriage,
harassment crap, it gets better.
oh yeah, and every marriage, I call it the mountain. Every marriage will have a mountain issue, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And
of course.
if you can identify that and get over the mountain, man, you are in smooth
You're in
sailing
the
for a very
valley
long
after
time.
that.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, like I try to tell people, young people, like they don't understand. Like they can have like really cool, they can date cool people, they can hook up if they're into that kind of thing. They can have all
I'm
these
hesitant on encouraging them to hook up. I think,
I'm not encouraging it. I'm saying that
yeah,
they do it. And
okay.
if they're into these kinds of things, what I'm saying is there's a lot of things, but even if they get into kind of stable relationships for a year or 2 or 3 years or 4 years or whatever, it's like, I hate to break it to you guys. A successful relationship is an investment and
Hmm.
you don't get the return on your investment in 4 years. You get the return on your investment in like 15, 20, 25, 30 years. So I tell these young people all the time, it's like you got all your dating life, whatever it involves, good or bad. Yeah, you're out, you're young, you're hot, you're having fun, or whatever you're doing, and you can't have what I have. And it's not a matter of you're not allowed to have it. You have to get there. And the only way
Hmm.
to get there is to invest. The only way to invest is to start. So you have to find somebody worth investing in. That's job number one. Determine that they're worth investing in. Then it's a risk because maybe they're actually not, and you're making a mistake. And so you have to throw all your chips on the table. You're going to be confused with hormones and dopamine and stuff. And so you're going to throw all your chips on the table basically into this person. And the goal is to just keep throwing chips as you get them. And if you get, like you said, over the mountain, what you end up with is like an annuity. I mean, I hate to phrase a marriage like an annuity, but the
No, it's
return on
fine.
investment
It's
starts
proper.
multiplying like by the time you get 20 years in. And so it's like it's not that you're excluded from through some system of injustice. And it's not dating culture or Tinder or hookup culture or college or apps or any of this that's excluding you from it. It's that you have a 20-year process that you have to go through. And P.S., it doesn't matter if you start now or in 3 years or in 5 years or in 10 years. You still have a 20-year process from that day. You don't start today because you heard it. So you need to find somebody worth investing in, which means you have to go where people who might be worth investing in are,
Which
circulate
is
in
more of
those
a challenge
spaces,
as well.
get involved. It is, but this is where responsibility again comes through. People are like, well, how do you convince people to take responsibility besides the fact that even though their life might sometimes be more modest with huge potential for payoff, at least they're their own master. Well, here's one thing. I'll tell you what. If you're a guy, women in general respect the hell out of people who take responsibility and organize their lives, and they do not want a whiner and a complainer and an external locus of control. The goal, if we get into kind of the psychology, is almost the woman should also have, of course, her own internal locus of control, but she would prefer, in many cases, it's not all cases, but psychologically, many prefer to defer some of that control to a man. And if you don't have that internal locus of control yourself as a man, if you aren't taking full responsibility, not acting wild and stupid and crazy, and not getting into despair and all this nasty garbage and being angry all the time. If you can't do that, you're not attractive. If you can do that, you're more attractive. So turns out you get these weird multiplier effects. You start taking responsibility in your life, you start, organizing yourself, you get an internal locus of control. Hey, things aren't great, but I can solve it. I'll find a way. I'm going to do it. And you just have that grit and that will and that desire to make your life grow and better within your, again, maybe it's 3 feet of influence at first. Maybe it's 30, maybe you were born with more opportunity or whatever, but within your influence, you grow into that responsibility and then circulate where you're likely to find other potential good investments as partners, and you're going to find somebody and she's going to be attracted to you. It's just going to work. It's like freaking magic. And if you are not doing that, you're not deserving of the person that you're dreaming of having, and she's not going to like you and you're not going to get her. And if you're young women, it works exactly the same way the other way around. I'm not going to go into all the details, but you get it. It's like this weird magic spell, but you guys, young people, you're not young people either. We're old. Young people need to start to realize that what they're looking for are these long-term investments that pay off. And granted, we have a lot of challenges. It is true that the young dating culture and the distraction culture of apps and so on makes it harder to date. It is true that there are a lot of people doing bad things that make them less apparently invest worthy partners because there's a lot of bad stuff and externalizing of control going on. It's also true that it's very hard to buy into other investments, building a business, buying a home, and so on, accruing and building property, which are the traditional avenues to secure wealth, are being shut off by this corrupt system. It's very difficult to do those things. But the people who are going to really win are the people not who throw a giant fit about it, but are the people who start figuring out how to succeed both in and against the current challenges, which is going to mean adopting some countercultural views toward if the cultural view toward dating is all this kind of apps and hookup culture and meeting people online, go out of your way to meet people in person. Go out of your way, therefore, to go places and join things where you're likely to meet good people. When I was younger, there wasn't the internet, there wasn't dating apps. So the way that we did it was that we joined clubs, we joined churches, we got involved in civic organizations and community stuff to try to hopefully meet somebody. We went to school to maybe meet somebody, as opposed to going to the bar. It was always like, is it, I
James,
mean, you,
those numbers like are done. Kids don't go to the bar anymore, pretty
uh,
much.
well, I'm
Yeah.
saying the bar was like the bad place, right? It's some
Yeah.
girl you met in a bar. Oh, gross. Which is not necessarily the case. A lot of times that works out. But the fact is that there are kind of more pro-social and less pro-social ways that people met each other. And that's still
We are
true.
like this close from having a crazy revolution where people start getting together face to face again, and it's a
Yeah,
thing.
right. Like I talk to some of these guys, they're like, I'm going to church and there's no girls there. And I'm like, why don't you invite a girl to go to church with you?
Mm.
Like go to church, build that foundation, and why don't you just start inviting some to come to church with you? Make a church date. It's going to be very pure and innocent and fun. It's not going to be anything like a hookup app. And maybe she doesn't want to, and then you learn something. And maybe she does, and then you learn something else.
And that's a whole other
It's
spin.
again, it's internal locus of control. I have a problem, can't find anybody to date. How do I solve it? What steps can I take? Get involved. Well, I thought there was going to be good women here and I can't find any. It's not working out. What do I do? Why don't I try inviting some? Why don't I try, getting involved in the different kind of outreach programs or whatever it happens to be that the church is doing? What if okay, that's fine. Maybe I need to get involved with a, local political campaign. Lots
Hmm.
of women working in political campaigns right
No,
now.
it's a great
They
idea.
probably share similar values.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. I'm encouraging young men to do the same all the time, and I think people need to hear this more and more.
A
Um,
great Canadian named Chris Elston always says, good things happen when you go outside.
Absolutely. All we have, what's life is 99% just showing up.
Yeah, that's right. That's another one.
Consistently showing up. I see you are a bit over time, so I don't want to push your schedule too much. I was wondering just quickly if
Yeah.
I could find out if there's any new books or anything coming out, and then after that, I'm going to hit the kill the recording and close us off air if that's okay.
Yeah, no, the answer to that right now is actually no. I am rapidly I was working on a couple books and I'm in a rapid research phase. Obviously, I diverted into studying the woke right phenomenon. The woke left phenomenon is still very important, but it's less like it's less pertinent and urgent, for example, for me to finish a book about Maoism, although
Hmm.
many people want me to do it. I was about three-quarters of the way through a first draft on a book about Maoism. I got diverted, needing to do some more foundational research
Hmm.
on the Cultural Revolution. So I got diverted for a little while from writing on it. And so as I finally got ready to come back to it, things had shifted culturally, and I got more or less distracted. And my ethos, like you brought up earlier, is usually to put out as much stuff for free as fast as I can.
Yeah.
And so I dedicate virtually all of my time right now to just spilling the beans on what I'm learning about fascism, about my guesses about what's going on in the MAGA movement and
Hmm.
the woke right. And
You've been relevant a few times in your career now. Do you feel like you're on like an up or a down or a peak? Where do you think you're
I've
at?
been very down. These guys, the woke right canceled me with conservatives. So relatively speaking, I'm very down in relevance. I have a feeling like I'm feeling like I've hit the bottom of the U and it's starting to curve back
Yeah.
up. And so we've passed the bottom, and I believe that this is has a very high chance of being quite a rocket ride to high relevance, but I'm not positive.
I think it
Um,
could be too, because when I first saw you online and doing your woke right thing, I had a bit of an eye roll, right? I was like,
yeah,
oh, here we go again, another divisionary tactic. We don't need one. We're fresh on the right. Give us a chance, kind of deal.
yeah,
And I say us because I lean a little bit right of center usually
yeah,
in
I
my
got you.
personal values, and so but now the reason I'm even here today is I think you're on the money, unfortunately,
That's how I
and
feel. I'm
and
always
I
sad to
think
be right.
yeah, and I think it sucks that you're right, and I'm disappointed that I think you're right, and I think we need to like we need to continue to improve, and the only way we're going to do that is to identify these crappy elements in our groups and pull them out into the light.
Yeah, and my guess is there are a relative handful of bad actors, like really not that many. We
It's like a
probably
5% sociopath factor we're always dealing with, right?
That's right. And so you have to identify and quarantine that aspect of it because they're bad actors. And we don't want bad actors on any side. Nobody wants that. But then a lot of people are fellow travelers and most of them will come back. Once the kind of eye-opening happens, a lot of them are going to come back. And I look forward to that. People make mistakes. People get caught up in momentum. So what? Like,
Yeah.
great, we've got problems to solve. Welcome back.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's valuable. Anyways, James, I want to thank you so much for your time today. I'm just
Yeah,
gonna
thank you.
hit the record button and then I'll close this out off air if that's okay with you.
Perfect. Yeah.
Awesome.
I'll jump to my meeting here in a second.
Okay, pleasure, brother. Just gonna stop this recording.